structural or failures. So in this particular case, they would be looking at the rotor blades themselves connected to the rotor head. As one of our experts was reporting that they make it easy to see these because they're color coded, they're marked, so you can see from a distance, are they aligned, or is there a misalignment? If there's a misalignment, what's the misalignment? And then are you going to reject that flight, write it up for maintenance to go and take a look at it? So, but you're going to check the critical systems of your aircraft to make sure that none of those are going to have a problem.
Yeah. So we now know the tour company is New York Helicopters, and so I imagine now they're going to check and see it's accredited. What were the inspections that went on before it took off? This is a very rare instance.
Well, and they're also going to look at the manufacturer of the helicopter, right? So it's a Bell 206. So they're going to look at Bell 206s and say, has this happened to other Bell helicopters around the world? Because it's a very popular helicopter.
Yeah.
So that will be another part of the investigation. That's how, then when you see something like this happen, potentially then they may, if it's a flaw in the helicopter, they may then ground all the Bell helicopters until they can figure out what may have happened.
I was going to say, glad you're here because there's a lot more questions to ask you. But right now, if you're just joining us, it is 6 p.m. on this Thursday. We're following this tragic helicopter crash. 6 people dead here in the Hudson. We've been talking about it for quite some time now, but we're going to turn things over to Jessica Formoso, who is live on scene.
She's joining us now. Jess, what can you tell us? What's the very latest?
Natasha and Bianca, I'm here at Pier 40. The press conference just wrapped up and we have new information to share with you. We're going to start with the victims. We know 6 people were on board that helicopter, the pilot, 2 adults and 3 children. This is a family from Spain that was here visiting New York City. We know that there 4 people were pulled out of the water dead. 2 were taken to the hospital, but then were later pronounced dead at the hospital. I'm going to step out of the way here so you can zoom in to see that the rescue efforts here have concluded. They said it was around 3:17 when calls started to come in to 911 saying a helicopter was in the Hudson River. The officials here telling us that FDNY has and NYPD immediately, even Port Authority divers got into the water, and they want to make something clear that those divers really tried. They tried to save everyone, but it was impossible. We know, as you've been reporting, that this was a helicopter from New York Helicopters, a Bell 206. It had left the helicopter port. It was before it crashed. It was reached the George Washington Bridge heading back, and that's when it lost control and hit the water. Of course, the cause of this is still under investigations. Officials say they didn't give us the ages of the children or their genders. They're pending notifying the family. But again, this was a family from Spain visiting. They were touring the city. Got on the helicopter trying to enjoy the skyline, and unfortunately they lost their life today. We don't know the ages of the children, but the commissioner, the FDNY commissioner and the police commissioner saying that a lot of calls came in saying that they saw this helicopter circling, lost control, and the next thing they saw was that it was in the Hudson River. That's the latest information we have here from Pier 40, but we'll send it back to you.
All right, Jessica, thank you. We have JP Tristani joining us now. JP, we were on the phone with you in the last hour. You kind of said that this helicopter was doomed upon just, entering to the water, just what we saw in that video. You listened to that press conference live with Mayor Adams. Anything that stuck out to you in the information that they shared?
No, really, because they don't know anything at all about what happened to the helicopter. They're just making their normal statements of grievance of a family that lost their lives in a tragedy. So they're not the engineers. I would prefer to listen to Nick Gregory and his excellent presentations. And that is where the facts are. That hub of the helicopter where the blades are attached to at the end of that shaft. If you look at a helicopter and you see the shaft that comes up from a little bulge, that's the transmission. And on top of that is the hub where the blades connect. Actually, there's a nut there that we used to call a Jesus nut. And so you want to make sure that that nut is secure. And as Nick explained, you have also lineups that you can check during a pre-flight. Yes, but you could have also in this particular failure is just a fatigue failure of that particular nut.
Yeah.
It did not misalign. It could just be a fatigue factor of the nuts that connected. Now, insofar as that helicopter fuselage being impacted, it's logical that if the blades lead that particular shaft, that the helicopter is going to pitch forward, which for an instant puts that tail assembly to the helicopter blade. So that has nothing to do with it. The minute that helicopter lost those blades, it was doomed. The rest of it is ancillary damage, either being struck by the blades or anything else. But basically, you've got a failure in that hub, and that's going to be one of the forensic investigations performed by the NTSB when they recover everything.
JP, one more question before we toss to another reporter on scene there. Do you know what kind of warning signs, if any, that a pilot might get before something like this happens?
Yeah, a normal helicopter has vibration, but if there's something that snaps like that, then nut shearing, for instance, yeah, you're going to get an increase in the normal vibration of that vibrating machine. But it doesn't matter because it's going to be instantaneous. And like a fixed wing aircraft where the emergency procedures are two, one is by just a normal procedure that's memory. In 47 seconds, you're required to act. And then you go to a checklist. There's no checklist for this. This particular amazing occurrence to me, without much of a database, as much as I've flown choppers and tested them, helicopters are basically a unstable aircraft with the autopilots on, unlike a fixed wing aircraft that has stability. So I prefer doing stability and control on a fixed wing aircraft, fighter, transport, than a helicopter, which is inherently dangerous. But whatever happened there, the pilot had no chance. Once that blade left, there's nothing left for him to do. There's no recovery possible. The stick is ineffective, what you call stick, I call a cyclic. It's just impossible. We have to doom the minute those blades left.
Yeah. All right. JP, we appreciate you. Thank you so much. We want to go live to Meredith Gorman now, who was on the New Jersey side of the Hudson River near the crash site. Meredith, what can you tell us? You've been talking to witnesses all afternoon.
I've been talking to witnesses all afternoon, but I actually just walked along this pathway along the water. And if you go over around the corner and down a bit, there's a bunch of debris, which is presumed.
Do you know the U.S. solar company's nasty little secret? It turns out if you live in Pennsylvania, they have to give you solar panels for absolutely no net cost. All you have to do is ask. Solar companies in the U.S. are trying everything to keep this away from the public, but it's slowly leaking out. And it's all because of the Inflation Reduction Act our government announced just 1 month ago. As a part of America's efforts to fight climate change, our government practically started handing out next-generation solar panels and power walls at no net cost to anyone who qualifies for this program. It's crazy. So if you are currently talking to any solar companies in the US, stop. Just tap below and see if your zip code qualifies and take advantage of this crazy solar opportunity before its budgets are gone.
When I grow up, I want to be just like my big sister. She's on the soccer team, she volunteers at the library, and she works so hard in school. She uses IXL, and it's really helping her learning.
That test is going to be so hard, but I'm feeling more prepared for it every day.
I'm sure it'll be fine, even if it takes you 3 tries to pass, like your driver's test.
Hey, it wasn't 3 times.
It was actually 4. Anyway, I want to be just like my big sister. That's why I started using IXL.
No matter your age, IXL works for you. Start learning today at IXL.com.
And then I also spoke to another witness. She said that the crash woke her son up from his nap. She didn't hear it really because she was on a work call in the other room. Her husband heard it. You know, they spoke with other people in the building, and people are really shaken up about this. Again, there's been a lot of people coming around here and trying to check out, you know, what's going on. But again, the crash happened so fast. They heard a loud boom, but people really didn't see anything hit the water because, again, it all happened so fast, Natasha.
All right. Meredith, thank you very much. I want to bring you out live. You can kind of see that crane there, that ship waiting to pick up what's left of that helicopter upside down in the water there. If you're just joining us, 6 people have died in this tragic helicopter crash into the Hudson River. We got a better idea of the timeline when we were listening live to the mayor. We know now that this was a tourist helicopter carrying tourists from Spain. It took off at 2:59 p.m. and then around 3:17, that's when the situation happened. And around 3:40, that's when emergency personnel arrived to the scene and they were able to see that this helicopter was upside down. We came on air sometime around, I would say 4 o'clock or so. And at that point, piecing it together, then we saw the video, which was quite shocking, of what looked like the blade coming apart from the body of the helicopter, and then we're starting to see, you know, what's left of it, putting together all this information. And let's go to Sharon now, who's also been following this. Sharon, any new details that you could share with us?
Yeah, well, we just heard from the mayor and the police commissioner and other emergency officials at a news conference that wrapped up just a couple of minutes ago. And really, as you mentioned, a tragic situation that unfolded this afternoon starting at 3:17 p.m. We learned that 6 people are dead, 3 of them children, a family from Spain, as well as the adult pilot. And we learned that the helicopter, as it came apart in midair and fell into the Hudson River shortly after it had been up sightseeing perhaps by the George Washington Bridge. It ended up crashing sort of near Hoboken, near River Road there, River Drive, I should say. We heard from the mayor, we heard from officials. Let's hear what they had to say upon finding out exactly what happened.
Our hearts go out to the family of those who were on board and all 6 who were on board of the helicopter.
Close just lastly, when myself and Commissioner Tucker arrived on the Jersey side of the Hudson River, we were met by the first responders and they told us they did everything they can to try to save these victims. And you can see the trauma on their face. They did everything they can, and they wanted me to make sure that I made that public.
So this emergency operation is really involving people on both sides of the river, New Jersey and New York, and also the FAA and the NTSB. I can tell you we have also learned that the water temperature, 45 degrees, and we heard the police commissioner say that the helicopter crashed upside down. So really little chance for survival, it seems, for all 6 who perished on this helicopter. This, of course, will be an ongoing investigation. They did not release the names of the 3 children and 3 adults who were on board. We do know that the helicopter was made by New York Helicopters. We are awaiting response from them and, you know, for more information on this. But it does appear that they have stopped looking for survivors and are just gathering the debris now, Bianca and Natasha. But, you know, really heartbreaking to hear. And I think that's one of the reasons that this press conference was pretty brief. It was 10 minutes or so instead of an hour, and they didn't take a lot of questions because really they're still trying to notify next of kin and obviously find out how this could have happened.
Yes, Sharon. Well, we appreciate you breaking that down for us. We're going to turn things over to Jessica Formoso, who's there on the scene. Jessica, you heard one of the officials say that there was trauma on the responders' faces as obviously they were trying to get someone alive out of that water, out of that helicopter. That didn't happen, and then this is what you're left with. Obviously a tragic scene here. Tell us what you know, you've talked to some people there on scene. What is it like there being near this accident?
Well, Bianca, I can tell you that it's sad. It's sad. It's somber. You know, we just heard from officials here, and how you described it perfectly well. These first responders, they're trained to do this, right? This is what they do. But the commissioner there is saying that they could not believe. And when they were trying to save, and he's made it clear, they tried to save every single life, but they just couldn't this time around. We know 4 of them, they pulled them out of the water dead. 2, they rushed to the hospital and they were pronounced later on dead. We know that this was a family from Spain, 2 adults and 3 children. They did not give us their ages or identities, including the pilot. We know, as you've been reporting, this was a tourist Bell 206 helicopter from New York Helicopters. It fell apart midair, plummeted into the Hudson River. The police commissioner saying saying the call started to come in around 3:17, multiple calls, and the fire commissioner said that some of the assets, FDNY assets, are really close, so they went right into the water trying to find survivors, and clearly that was not the case. I'm going to step out of the way here so you guys can take a look of what's left here. This is now this is an investigation. Recovery efforts completed at this hour. They also told us that by 3:08, so it left the heliport around 2:59-ish. By 3:08, the helicopter had reached the George Washington Bridge. It was, I guess, heading back this way when it lost control and hit the water. The police commissioner, Jessica Tisch, saying the helicopter hit the water inverted, and I think that's what made it difficult, right? When it went upside down into the water to try to get those victims out alive, which clearly that did not happen here today. But again, we now know this was a family who was visiting from Spain. They are notifying family members. Also, I know that they're working with the consulate here. There is a Spanish consulate here in New York City. They're working with them, and hopefully we'll have more information later on today or even tomorrow of who these victims were.
All right, Jess, thank you very much. I want to bring in Nick now. I mean, a tragic situation, but I just want to underline how rare of a situation this is for that propeller to come apart and still be spinning with the two blades. Just kind of fill us in and how much of a rarity this is.
It's very rare. I've never really seen anything like that happen. To have the whole rotor assembly, which sits on top of the helicopter, of course, come apart. And as JP pointed out correctly, what will happen is when that happens, the helicopter pitches down. So that's why, as it pitches down and the blade's coming apart, it potentially slice the tail off.
I see.
But again, this type of catastrophic failure is not. I've not ever heard of this happening. It's not to say that it hasn't happened, because the Bell 206 is a very popular helicopter flown all over the world.
Right, we talked about that.
So and known as a fairly reliable helicopter as well. But I mean, they're going to be investigating, of course, this particular helicopter, maintenance records. Was there something there before that got fixed? Maybe they get fixed right. We talked about fatigue. Was there what are called airworthiness directives? So the FAA puts out things called airworthiness directives, which are, some are mandatory fixes, some are you fix it at the next inspection, some is you just have to look at it every 100 hours or 200 hours that you fly. Was there a airworthiness directive that pertained to this model helicopter? Was that directive complied with? So they'll get into a deep dive into the history of this particular helicopter and overall reports of any issues like this with other Bell 206 helicopters.
And those reports is going to take some time for it to get back.
Exactly. Usually, a full report from the NTSB takes well over a year before
we heard JP say something about, flying in a craft like this, and he was like, this is not something I want to do. This is, and it almost sounded like this was dangerous. And in the past, since you've been here for a while, there have been some crashes here in New York. 2018, 5 people dead, sightseeing heli and crashed in the East River. And then 2019, a helicopter crash in the Hudson River. This was after refueling, but that pilot survived. So
and there was another big crash in 2009, which changed the flight rules along the Hudson River, because you had a plane that took off from Teterboro, a fixed wing aircraft, the Piper, low wing aircraft, and a helicopter was coming up underneath it. So they didn't see each other. So the helicopter was underneath the pilot's wing. He couldn't see the helicopter. The pilot of the helicopter couldn't see the fixed wing, so they collided.
How dangerous are these helicopters then?
Well, I mean, there's definitely a risk in flying them. I mean, as we were talking earlier, and you speak to some of the other professional helicopter pilots that have been on our program this afternoon, and you have all these parts moving, trying to get away from each other. I mean, there's a lot going on in there, a lot of moving parts, and it's quite a skill to be able to fly a helicopter. I've flown a little bit. I don't have my helicopter rating, but I have got some helicopter time. It's challenging. I mean, I've been flying fixed wing aircraft for 42 years. So, and I'm kind of with JP. I'd rather stay in a fixed wing aircraft. I have a better chance potentially of gliding to safety. I mean, we discussed something that helicopters can do called auto rotation, and where again you can sort of disengage the transmission, the clutch from the engine itself if there's an engine issue going on, and then the actual torque that the blades are still generating, you can auto rotate that helicopter to a safe landing somewhere. But you have to have the blades to do that, right? So in this case, the blades completely came off. So there was no lift at all now being generated. So as JP had pointed out, they didn't have a chance.
It was doomed. So now the FAA and NTSB are investigating, and we do have a retired Navy captain, aviation and search and rescue expert joining us on our air right now, Armin Kurdian. Can you hear us, Armin?
Got you loud and clear.
Okay, so we now know that this was a tourist helicopter. What is the information? What are the questions that you have, as you hear all this news unfold and as we listen to the situation and the timeline that was laid out by the mayor?
Well, obviously, the first thing is just absolutely awful. You have an entire family go down with that helicopter. So, we have to keep them in our minds and our hearts. But as everybody's talked about, this looks like some kind of massive catastrophic failure from which the pilot had no chance to actually recover from. So, what they're going to try and find out is, was this a failure of material, like did the shaft actually crack or did it break? Or was there some kind of, so sorry. Was there some kind of loosening or did something come loose? That one thing led to another that eventually everything sort of vibrated apart over a period of a few seconds, or was it one massive break?
Captain Kurdian, maybe you can walk us through what a proper search and rescue response looks like for a crash like this. What happens within the first 5 minutes after impact?
We've seen so many crashes in the Hudson lately, or you saw up in DC over the water. In these massive metropolitan areas, the response is fast, it's massive and immediate. Plus, simply the fact there's plenty of sea traffic on the river to begin with, that's going and checking everything out. So you're going to send in your folks to first make sure the area is safe, that there's no fire, there's no additional floating debris, which would cause a hazard to your divers. The water temperature is going to dictate how many divers you need, because a diver can only go under that water for 20 or 30 minutes, even in a dry suit, 59 degrees. Not a lot of time to stay conscious underwater. So once you do that, you want to make sure that it's lit, that you can see the accident and then recover the bodies or recover the individuals if, by some miracle, they managed to survive.
But in terms of survivability, is there ever a scenario where someone could survive a mid-air mechanical failure like this?
Armin, are you still there? All right, we might have.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. Once those rotors come off, there's absolutely nothing you can do. You are completely along for the ride. And the way a helicopter crashes into the water, once it hits the surface of the water, it's going to invert, even if it lands or comes down vertically, because the top of the helicopter is much heavier than the bottom. It's going to completely flip over, so they're going to be hanging on their straps.
And then how long might it take before we get some answers, as we're referring to the FAA and NTSB and investigating?
Honestly, for a situation like this, where I believe that the helicopter, I think you're going to find it mostly intact under the water. Once you pull it out and put it on a bed, you're going to want those inspectors looking at it literally right then and there, because they're going to want to see if this was a clean break or if not. If it was a clean break, or if it was, say, something that just got dislodged or came loose, that you don't see any physical parts that were broken or sheared that might have happened airborne, then that's going to lead you to one thing. Perhaps it was a maintenance issue. But if something physically tore or physically broke, and the engineers can quickly determine, looking at those brakes, whether it was something that was done on impact or whether it was something that was done in the air because the torque and the moments of inertia simply weren't working with each other airborne, they'll know that very quickly. So I bet you within about 24 hours of that helicopter coming out of the water, they're going to have a fairly decent idea of what happened.
All right, Armin, well, we really appreciate your expertise. Thank you for joining us. We want to go out live to Meredith Gorman now, close to the crash scene there in New Jersey. Meredith, what can you tell us?
That's right. Well, first of all, there's been a little bit more increased activity in terms of boats moving around the site of the debris that's still in the water behind us. Again, the debris has not been lifted out of the water yet. It is still submerged, and it looks like the legs, if you will, of the helicopter are still sticking up out of the water. But when I walked down this walkway, again, just a few minutes ago, there is what looks like personal belongings that may have belonged to the people who were in the helicopter floating around here. We saw what appears to be two brown leather seats that, again, you would assume came from this helicopter floating in the water. And there's also what seems to be an oil sheen on the water near where the helicopter crashed. Again, I talked to people that live in these neighboring buildings. A lot of them were home, working from home when the crash happened. They all heard a boom. They said it woke some of their babies up. Their dogs heard it and were startled and, started barking. And it's very somber, and people are really sad here. And again, when I first got to the scene earlier, I spoke with a young boy named Leo who was walking this walkway after school with his mom, and he actually saw a lot of the helicopter debris, and he took a video of it that he shared with me. Take a look here.
I mean, so first of all, a really important thing I saw. So I was walking to school, like my school's in Hoboken. So I was walking through that terminal, and then I didn't hear anything. I just saw a lot of these people. These people were standing at the pier. They were watching something, and then I saw all these boats, and then I'm like, "What happened over there?" And they said a helicopter crashed. So I'm like, "Yeah, that's really scary." And I continued down from my way to school, and then I saw this man filming something in the water. And at first I thought, recording litter in the water at this time? Seriously? But then I realized those were actual helicopter pieces. Yeah. So I joined the recording.
And what did you see? What did the helicopter pieces look like? You mentioned it might be the rotors?
Yeah. So it looked like the rotors. They were big, thick, and they had on one side, there were two pieces. So the bigger piece, it had on one side, it was black, and then there was this a goldish line, and then it was white. Maybe that can help you figure out which helicopter it is from.
Yeah, that's right. Again, people are just getting home from work, it seems like, around here. And we've seen a lot of people walking their dogs, people with families just coming to take a look, again, at the helicopter wreckage, which is still in the water. There's been some increased activity, as I said, with police boats and FDNY boats coming over close to where this big crane boat that's presumably going to pull the wreckage out of the water is. But again, it's still in the water. People coming over to look. And again, a lot of people can't believe that they're seeing, again, presumably wreckage and personal belongings from this helicopter right along this walkway. And I guess you would call it 10 feet, I would say. Not 10 feet, maybe 30 feet from these high-rise buildings. There's wreckage in the water floating. So police have not removed anything yet in terms of the materials from the water, guys.
Yeah, it's inconceivable. It's heartbreaking. Meredith, thank you. I mean, this is a sightseeing helicopter. So many of them taking off, and there's so many helipads around that area of the Hudson River too. And so it is truly, truly a heartbreaking afternoon on the Hudson River. We want to go to Jessica Formosa, who's been live along Pier 40. Jess, what are your sources telling you?
Bianca, Natasha, well, we now know that recovery efforts are over. They pulled the bodies out of the water. 4 of them were pronounced dead here at the scene. 2, they rushed to the hospital, but later died at the hospital. We know that this was a family from Spain. They were visiting 2 adults and 3 children, and also the pilot, all dead at this hour, we have learned. I'm going to step out of the way here because I want to show you there's not a lot of activity, but if he zooms comes in here, you're going to see there's some flashing lights, some NYPD rescue boats still here. But throughout the last hour, 2 hours, all the divers have come out of the water. We know that the call came in at 3:17 p.m. Multiple calls to 911 saying that there was a helicopter in the water. The police commissioner says the helicopter crashed near the New Jersey coastline here in the Hudson River. FDNY assets, we're told, were nearby, so they launched their boats right away. Rescue swimmers went right into the water. And we have to really give them credit, the work that they do. They are trained to do this, but yet today, this was traumatic for them. They went into that water, tried to save these young children and their family members along with the pilot, and they couldn't do it. They tried their best. They said they did everything they could there to save at least one life, but that was impossible. This was a Bell 206 helicopter from New York Helicopters. We're still waiting to hear from them. We did ask the mayor and the police commissioner and other officials here if they knew anything about this pilot. Was he an experienced pilot? Was he not? When was the last time this helicopter was inspected? Those questions they could not answer, saying that this is still under investigation. But we know at 3:08, the helicopter had reached the George Washington Bridge. It was turning around, but shortly after, within, they say, seconds, that's when the helicopter lost control, crashing into the Hudson River upside down. And I think that's what made it difficult to try to get that family and that pilot out alive. But we're live here at Pier 40. I can tell you the mood here, very sad. We saw divers come out, paramedics come out of the water, and you can see it in their faces, just how traumatic this has been, how sad. You can only imagine. We don't even know if that family and that pilot had a chance to even think or see what was happening. It happened so quickly that what went through that family's mind, those children, we don't know their ages, we don't know their gender. So a lot of questions, we know that they have not revealed their identities yet, and that's because they're waiting to notify the family. Again, this is a family from Spain. They were visiting, so they may not have any friends or relatives here at all. They're also working, I know, with the consulate to get that information out to their families. So hopefully we'll have more information on the victims in the coming hours or even tomorrow. But that's the latest I have here from Pier 40. Ladies.
Yeah, Jessica, you just painted a pretty heartbreaking picture there. To put yourself in these people's shoes as this is happening, it's terrible. It's terrible to think about. And we just wish their families the best, people that know them, as they're probably processing this right now. Jessica, we're going to turn things over to Linda Schmidt. We're hearing that she may have some information on the helicopter.
Let's actually go to Sharon Crowley. She's got a statement from the helicopter touring company, New York Helicopter. What are they saying, Sharon?
Yeah, we are finally getting some information here. The CEO of New York Helicopter Tours just issuing this statement saying, quote, "It's devastation. I'm a father and a grandfather, and to have children on there, I'm devastated. I'm absolutely devastated. I haven't seen anything like that in my 30 years in the helicopter business." And we learned just a few minutes ago from a press conference with the mayor and the police commissioner and others that it was New York Helicopters who owned and operated the helicopter that is involved in this deadly crash in the Hudson River where 6 people were killed, a sightseeing, a family from Spain. We don't know their names yet. As Jessica just said, 3 of them children. Let's hear now from the police commissioner who spoke just about a half an hour ago.
A Bell 206 helicopter flying for the tour company New York Helicopters took off from the downtown Manhattan heliport at 2:59 p.m. The aircraft flew south before turning to fly north along the Manhattan shoreline up the Hudson River. At 3:08 p.m., the helicopter reached the George Washington Bridge and then turned again to fly south along the New Jersey shoreline. Shortly thereafter, the aircraft lost control and hit the water just a few feet off the coast of Pier A Park in Hoboken. The cause of the crash is currently under investigation.
We also heard from Mayor Adams describing this as a heartbreaking tragedy. And before I send it back to you, I just want to reiterate something we heard from an eyewitness who said he saw this crash in midair. And I'm going to quote him for you. Bruce Wall said he saw the helicopter falling apart in midair with the tail and propeller coming off. The propeller was still spinning without the aircraft as it fell. So a lot of people in Hoboken probably saw this happen if they happened to be looking up at the skies this afternoon about 3:17 or a few minutes thereafter when all this started to unfold. We also heard from New Jersey Governor Murphy extending his condolences and saying that his emergency responders are working with people, the NYPD and FDNY as well. So now this investigation likely turned over to the FAA and the NTSB as we get a little further in this.
And one of the SAR persons who's search and rescue that we spoke to not too long ago was saying that we might be able to get a report back on this pretty quickly. So we're going to see how things go. Sharon, thank you for bringing us that bit of information. Turning over to Nick now, though, I just want to make sure and clarify that weather was not a factor here.
No. I mean, the weather had been deteriorating as the day had gone along. The winds had started to pick up. I flew this morning and it wasn't that bad. The ceiling was quite high. I looked at the observation from Teterboro Airport, which is the nearest airport to the crash scene. And at the time of the incident, the accident, the wind was out of the southeast, a little gusty. It was gusting up over 30 miles per hour, but the visibility was great, 10 miles visibility, and the ceiling was up at about 6,000 feet, the lowest cloud layer. So weather not a factor at all. It seems to be just something went wrong with those blades, the rotor head, whether fatigue or bolts coming loose, a series of events that may have happened very quickly. One leading to another situation, and then the catastrophic failure at that point.
When you look at the water temperature, 40s to low
45
50s,
about 50, yeah.
And I just feel like it was death upon impact with just how brutal that was. But then if there was a possibility of survival with the water temps being so cold, and then just the fact that hypothermia sitting in 45 minutes. I mean, it was just a tragedy from the start.
Well, and they, if you look at the timeline, right, we're talking the accident happened at 3:17 and
2:59. So it's like 18 minutes
so
or
18
so.
minutes from in flight time. But the accident having happened at 3:17. And the first responders didn't get there till 3:40. So they may have been inverted under the water for more than 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And now, and again, think about that, being inverted under the water in your belts, no training to be able to get out of there, right? So just a recipe for disaster.
It's really difficult to paint that picture as you asked us to do. And I know this hits differently because there's kids involved. And Nick, you're not just a pilot, you're a dad.
Yes.
How does this land for you?
Well, I mean, it's tragedy, right? You think about losing your children. And again, something like this, if you think about training, where you do egress training, right? Where you would practice in a scenario where you dive into the water, the vehicle goes into the water, goes inverted, and you try to get out. And again, there's disorientation, there's darkness, you don't know what's going on. But here the tragedy again, and here what potentially looks like a whole family.
Tourists from Spain visiting New York.
If you're a surviving parent, it would be awful. Of course, but having the potential here, what we can assume potentially maybe a whole family was lost.
Do people get briefed on any kind of emergency?
Booking a flight? Download Kayak's app and set a price alert. We'll notify you as soon as the price changes.
At Penn Medicine, sometimes innovation starts when hope has run short. A breakthrough idea becomes the new path forward, and an immune system transforms into a cancer killer. An invisible battle, and this can't be, is now 10 years cancer-free. At Penn Medicine, our innovation is changing lives, one moment, one treatment, one patient at a time. Penn Medicine.
Of a safety briefing, but does that briefing cover something like this? I mean, the briefing may be to show you how to unbuckle your seatbelt, to show you how to open the door if you have to get out. But that's assuming that you've landed somewhere safely
And upright.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, they're not going to, there's no way they could brief them on an inverted impact into the water and have them respond.
Yeah.
It's just impossible,
But
really, to have them do it. But
with these flight companies operating daily, hundreds of them, I'm not sure, but there's quite a bit. I mean, you're over water. Manhattan's surrounded by water. Is this not something that they should talk about?
Well, again, it's probably done in a briefing if it's going to be a normal, potential off-site landing, let's say. So where, as we discussed, a helicopter, if it has an engine issue, you can sort of detach the blades from the clutch. There is what we would call it, the transmission, and so now the blades are still spinning. So the helicopter pilot takes that energy that they're still generating to what's called auto-rotate the helicopter down. So he's still getting lift. He's still able to somewhat directionally control the helicopter, he or she, and make a landing upright, either in a field, in the water, where the potential floats that are on the skids would then inflate, and the helicopter would then be upright. So the briefing would include, if that happens, this is what you do. If I can't, as the pilot, get back to you, this is how you buckle your seatbelt. This is how you open the door. When you exit the helicopter, stay away from the blades, that type of a briefing. But this type of a scenario, being very rare, really, how do you brief for that? You really can't.
Yeah.
So
well, Nick, the fact that you're a pilot, your expertise has been invaluable in the last 2.5 hours that we've been on air, just uncovering this live together. We want to go to Meredith now, who is live out in New Jersey. And Meredith, you have some new video of the debris that people are now finding at this crash site.
That's right. There's a bunch of debris that is along this walkway here, which is looking out over the crash site. Again, take a look at this video that we just took moments ago. But you guys mentioned safety manuals and the briefing that they give people when they get on an aircraft or a helicopter. Well, there was actually safety manuals floating in the water that I saw myself as part of the debris. We saw two seats, brown leather seats, floating in the river along this walking area. A lot of people who have come to look at the helicopter, which is still submerged in the water behind me, have seen the debris floating in the water. We saw a water bottle floating with the rest of the debris, which again you would assume came from inside the helicopter. I saw what appeared to be a bag floating, which again, likely somebody's personal belongings. And there's also a bit of an oil slick in the water, which you would think came from this helicopter as well. But again, the police and authorities haven't really retrieved any of the floating debris from this area yet. And people are just really taken aback by all of this and taking it in as they come and survey the scene.
Yeah, Meredith, I'm sure we're going to be seeing a lot of that debris ending up there as they're still trying to clean up this scene, a tragic scene. We're going to turn things over to Dan Rice. We talk to Dan a couple times a week up in the chopper in Skyfox HD. Dan, you do this for a living. How is this landing for you right now as you're seeing this unfold?
This is tough to watch. For what we do for a living, anything's a possibility. You're prepared for it. You heard about the safety briefings and everything else. I know 25, 30 years ago, somewhere in that range, I went up to Groton, Connecticut and did a water egress training to prepare me for the unlikely event we ended up in the water. When you look at that chopper upside down in the water, those yellow bags out of those gray bags, those are what we call the floats. And they're there in case of an emergency landing in the water. But what you'll notice in those bags, with the way those floats are, they're not deployed. The pilot did not even have enough time to deploy the floats. The video out there, it's scary to see that because when you see the one video from the piers where you see the chopper coming down upside down, the very first thing I see is the main rotor system is missing and the tail boom is missing. Without any rotors on the aircraft, the pilot has zero control of the situation. Everybody's along for the ride set. That's scary to watch.
Yeah.
That style helicopter, that is the helicopter we fly.
I was just about to say that. So the Bell 206 is what you're flying too.
Correct. It's a Bell 206 Long Ranger 4, L4 they call it. Two big rotors on top, two little rotors on the back, single engine aircraft. It seats 7 people in it. For us, it's configured differently, but that's what it can fit.
Dan, we're hearing from a couple pilots who are saying they don't trust helicopters. They'd rather be in a fixed wing aircraft. You do this every day. Can you explain why that fear is present for a lot of pilots?
I got to be honest now. Again, I always make the preface there, tell everybody, I'm not a pilot. I'm a reporter, camera operator who flies in the helicopter every single day for the last 25-something years. I have yet to meet a helicopter or a pilot who's afraid of the helicopter itself. I don't know where that fear comes from because, honestly, just looking at this instance, I'm not going to speculate what happened, but it's a single aircraft incident. It wasn't there wasn't a collision. There wasn't some sort of error that way. Something happened catastrophically in the air with a single aircraft. I would assume for pilots, when you're losing the rotors, and I can't remember any time in recent history, last 20, 30 years, where we've seen a rotor come off of a helicopter. So a lot of times we hear of auto rotation. I know we heard Nick talking about that earlier. That just takes if you have an engine failure, it takes the momentum of those big blades on top spinning, and the pilot can handle the helicopter getting down to the ground. If that's missing, then you have no control whatsoever.
Yeah.
So I'm going to assume if a pilot is saying that, and especially from fixed wing to a helicopter, a rotorcraft, that might be the fear. I'm not sure, to be honest, because I'll tell you what, I don't have a fear of getting back in our helicopter. We go back and do our job tomorrow or Monday or whenever we fly again. For us, I know our helicopter company does quite a bit of safety checks on our helicopter, a lot of maintenance. There's a lot that goes into flying these helicopters. You can't predict everything, but we haven't had enough incidents to me to warrant. I mean, we heard the mayor telling this press conference saying that the choppers are safe, and it's part of the New York experience.
Yeah.
So, it's such an unfortunate situation, and the NTSB will tell us. I mean, you heard them say, as soon as on the 911 calls, stop all traffic on the North River. That's the old name for the Hudson River. They do that to preserve the crash site so they can get as many pieces of that helicopter gathered up out of the water for the NTSB to do their proper investigation. And when they will come to us in about a year or so, with all their preliminary, probably in a couple of weeks, but they'll do their investigation and they'll let everybody know what happened with that specific helicopter.
Yeah, those are the big questions that, we want to know. Dan Rice, thank you so much. We want to go to Armin Kurdian, again, a retired Navy captain, aviation and search and rescue expert. Armin, so right now, the helicopter debris, what's left of it, is still in the water, and the NTSB FAA is investigating. Tell us, what are the next steps here once they're able to take this helicopter? I mean, is there a black box in there? We know that this was a touring company. What information are they looking to gather?
Certainly, it's possible that it may have had some kind of black box or recording device to determine, what position the flight controls were in, what was going on with the engine, what were the measures of torque, the engine temperature, fuel flow, all those kinds of things. Regardless, when they do pull it out of the water and bring it up, the engineers at the NTSB have done this a lot. They have looked at accidents, all kinds of shapes and sizes, and you'd be shocked and amazed as how good they are at reconstructing an aircraft once it's actually impacted. In this case, there was no explosion, there was no fire, and considering they're going to recover the rotor in the helicopter or other probably debris around the main body of the helicopter, the main fuselage. So it's very likely that they'll have at least 90% of the vehicles put back together. And I do believe that they'll have the critical parts and the critical components to actually look at. And then they have methods of looking at the shaft and the metal from a metallurgical standpoint. They'll use X-rays to look at the stresses in the shaft. They'll use X-rays to determine, stresses in the airframe of the body to know how it hit. they will be able to also determine and distinguish between what happened on impact and what might have happened actually airborne at that time. And then I really believe that they'll have a pretty decent idea of what happened within the first 2 or 3 days of looking at the vehicle.
Okay.
Armin, before we head over to another reporter on scene, I just want to ask you, you've commanded search and rescue operations. So what are crews up against in a river recovery like this one, especially when this aircraft broke apart the way that it did?
You've got the current to deal with. You've got the temperature of the water to deal with. You've got visibility in the water to deal with. You've got the ambient wind airborne to deal with as well. You've got daylight. So that's a positive thing. And considering that the aircraft is right, the helicopter right there on the surface of the water, daylight and visibility shouldn't be a problem. You had the accident in Reagan National. It was night, and those, a lot of that sunk to the bottom. So visibility was a major issue. Time and temperature of the water is also a problem.
All right, Armin, thank you very much. We want to go to our reporter, Linda Schmidt, out there live. Linda, I have a question for you regarding just public perception. I mean, paint a picture, just what people are thinking. I mean, plane crashes, we had the one that happened in D.C. You've reported on all of this. Just kind of what goes through your mind?
Well, whenever you're covering these types of things, certainly it's scary for the general public. I mean, it's scary for me as a human being and as a news reporter covering this kind of stuff, because so many of these accidents come out of nowhere, and they're like, for example, some of the experts talking earlier today, and even the helicopter pilot that you guys were just talking to, this to them, this is kind of a one-off type of situation, because there have not been many helicopter crashes in our area like this. And this is something that obviously, the wind out here, went catastrophically wrong with this aircraft. But helicopters, when you compare them, like Nick Gregory was talking about, when you're talking about an airplane versus a helicopter, an airplane is much safer and not as fragile as a helicopter is. But as far as the investigation goes, the NTSB and the FAA, they are going to be conducting investigations. And then, of course, preliminarily, they will have results of these investigations probably within about 3 to 6 months, because that's what normally happens, and they release a report. And then as far as a final report, that will most likely come in about a year. That's what historically has happened, whether it's a helicopter crash or a plane. But as far as the response out here, this was a massive emergency response. You had the FDNY out here. They were out here with divers and boats. You had the NYPD as well with divers, aviation, harbor, the scuba team, as I was just talking about. You had the Coast Guard that was out here, as well as Port Authority. And from the news conference that was conducted about, I guess, 40 minutes ago at this point, where the mayor was there, the fire commissioner was there, and the police commissioner. The police commissioner saying that NYPD divers recovered 4 of the bodies from the water, and divers with the FDNY recovered 2 of those bodies. And that this, again, was a family from Spain, and they were visiting here, and they were on one of these tour helicopters taking out a beautiful ride along the Hudson River. And they had left south of where I am right now. I'm at the 34th Street Pier, south of where we are now. They were it was a beautiful day earlier today as well. Traveling up the Hudson River, they made it up to the George Washington Bridge. They got to see that gorgeous view, and then they turned around and they headed back south here along the Hudson. And that's when things went tragically wrong. And when you look at that video and you see the propeller, now earlier on, my sources had told me that the propeller just came off of the helicopter, and then there is video supporting that. And then watching the body just drop like a rock into the Hudson River and then upside down. I mean, it's just the visual of it, and to know this family was on there and the pilot. I mean, my God!
I know it is truly
it's
it's
heartbreaking.
Linda. Yeah, it's heartbreaking, and how often we have these kind of sightseeing tour companies running in New York City. This is kind of just a routine thing that People do.
Yeah.
We want to go to Sharon now. Sharon, last time we saw you were sharing an update from the CEO of New York Helicopter. Do you have any other updates?
Yeah, just to remind you of what he had to say, just devastated. He said he's a father and a grandfather and has never seen anything like that in his 30 years in the helicopter business. Now, we also heard from the police commissioner, from the mayor, and I should say we heard from one of the first responders telling us that they did everything they could to try to save these lives. But as you can see from the video and the helicopter landing out of control into the Hudson River upside down, there's very little chance for survival, unfortunately. Let's hear from Mayor Adams. He spoke within the last hour.
3 adults and 3 children were on board a Bell 206 helicopter that had left from the downtown Skyport just about 3 p.m. The pilot and the family visiting from Spain, what our preliminary information has at this time. Members of the FDNY and NYPD harbor units arrived at the scene, and divers from both agencies entered the water. At this time, all 6 victims have been removed from the water. And sadly, all 6 victims have been pronounced deceased.
And we now know, as Linda and we've all been reporting to you for the last couple of hours, this is a family of tourists from Spain. We don't have their identities because the next of kin is still being notified. And if you're wondering what happens next, it's the FAA and NTSB that will take over this investigation, try to figure out what it appears happened is that the propeller came apart from the helicopter, of course, not allowing for the pilot to have any control of the aircraft. So that's the very latest here from the newsroom, and we'll be following it for you. And I have to say, you know, the witness accounts are what really get to me, the ones that actually saw this happen in the air, and some of the video that we've seen is really just shocking. And to see it go down so quickly like that, you can see why it was so difficult to save lives.
Sharon, do you have any of those witness accounts that maybe have stuck with you during the
I think
coverage?
there's a hostess who works at a restaurant in Hoboken when this happened, and I guess she happened to be looking, you know, out the window or up in the sky when this happened and saw smoke and saw the aircraft kind of come apart in midair, and then of course so quickly land in the Hudson River as this happened between, you know, Lower Manhattan and New Jersey. And that's why they got a response from the Port Authority and the Coast Guard and the FDNY and of course Jersey City and Hoboken first responders as well.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you breaking it down for us, giving us information on the tour company. We're going to turn things over to Dan Rice, who is in the same helicopter almost every single day for his job. He's not flying them, but he's in there reporting on what he sees and what's happening across our 5 boroughs. Dan, you know, as we said, you're in helicopters all the time. So when you heard that this one broke apart midair, what went through your mind?
It put a pit in my stomach, to be honest. You know, we are prepared for emergencies in the air. It's not uncommon. You know, I would be lying if I said I didn't have some sort of incident in my career. Nothing terrible. The pilots know what to do with the aircraft and put it down. But that's because they know, you know, the aircraft is intact. To see that 2 major components that keep the aircraft in the air came off the aircraft, that's scary. You know, that is the guy who's flying the helicopter now has no control. And that honestly, it was scary to hear that. It just put a bit in my stomach when I saw the videos.
You know something, because you're part of the aviation community here in the city. So I know when this happens, there's probably some kind of group chat going on about this, a conversation about what has happened. What is that conversation like among the pilots and crews after something like this devastating happens?
There's a lot of discussion. First off, what's really nice about this community, whether it's the other stations pilots, the other tour, we have a tour company here on the field where we fly out of. Everybody talks to each other. We check on each other to make sure everybody is mentally coping with it as best as they can. Everybody is that. It's scary to see one of your colleagues have an incident like that and the people that were on board. And a lot of times it just sparks a safety conversation. You know, is there something we can do better? Is there something we should look out for? And the NTSB report is going to be the most crucial thing for all these pilots, is making sure that they know what happened. And if it's something that they have to worry about, they'll be on it. They'll change. You It was back 2009, I believe it was, when we had that incident with a toy helicopter in an airplane over the Hudson River. It changed the way everybody flies on the Hudson River. The FAA changed the layers where different aircraft can be. And that is the one that comes out of an incident like this.
Yeah. Well, Dan Rice, we really appreciate your you being on the air with us. Thank you so much. Of course, a lot of unanswered questions tonight as we continue to follow this breaking news. We're going to have a lot more coverage coming up at 10 o'clock. Tragic day on the Hudson River today. 6 people dead in a helicopter crash. And stay with us. 10 o'clock news. We will have a lot more information. Thank you for joining us.
Okay.